would you spend a night in the screaming house? Would you spend 13 nights in the screaming house? Because 13 nights is the number of nights that the LaChance family made it in the screaming house. After that, they left screaming. And also to put this into perspective, the Lutz family, who is the Amityville Horror House family, they lasted 28 days. So obviously the house is haunted because turns out the screaming house really is filled with screams.
Oh, great.
The terrified screams of a family pleading for safety and a demon who took immense pleasure in using this home as its hunting ground. It is a poltergeist episode. Hello.
Hey.
This is Two Girls, One Ghost.
Two Girls, One Ghost. And we are
That's
your
Miley Cyrus.
I really
That's
do sound
Miley
like
Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus.
And I'm Corinne. You really do. It is so wild. I told you I
happened
gave you a
overnight.
song request. And I said, can you please sing Jolene? And you were like, I'm trying. And it's not sounding like Miley. So
I got her raspy voice. I did not get her vocal cords. The family over here, the family. I kind of like calling us the family. It feels more covenant.
yeah.
We're ill.
And ironically, you sound the sickest, but I'm the one that tested positive for COVID. So we're both very ill.
It's weird how we seemingly are in sync with our illnesses, but they often are separate illnesses.
I know. It's like we didn't get each other sick, and yet we both just at the same time. Like I texted you yesterday, and I was like, I'm going down, down, down. And you're like,
Down,
oh, it'll be
down.
fine. And then you sent me a voice note this morning, and you're like, what is happening to my voice?
Yeah.
Perfect for podcasting,
Hey,
right?
Miley here.
You have a sexy, raspy voice. I have a awesome nasally one. So thank you, everyone, for still listening.
Yeah. And we decided to record separately just to not make our illnesses worse. It doesn't make me sad. It makes me miss you. I feel like this is not the same. Even though we did this for 7 years, I don't like it as much.
I know now it definitely feels weird. Like it almost feels more performative for me. Like I'm like waiting because we can't, there's such a delay that like we can't just kind of like jump off of each other and go based on like vibes. And there's less like, facial, just like reading each other. So it's definitely more clunky, way more awkward.
But I do have something witchy to talk about.
Oh, okay, please.
So our coven brother, sister witch, Ash and I are doing a Wiccan witchcraft beginnings class together.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our first class this past weekend. And it's so fascinating because we're learning so much. And with any type of like spiritual practice or witchcraft, there's so much to learn. And I feel like I'm very much an eclectic witch where it comes to what feels right. I don't just follow everything.
Yeah, you're the grab bag witch.
Exactly. So I decided I was going to because this class is like 8 months, but it's once a month for 6 hours. It's a long class. But I decided I'm going to start to share the things that speak to me from the class. And you and I, Corinne, kind of briefly talked about this. I don't know if you heard that, but Leia's freaking out. Leia, moon magic. I feel so attracted to the moon and moon magic.
Yeah.
So I briefly wanted to go over what we learned.
Yeah, please do. Because when I did see you earlier this week, you like pulled out this chart of all the moon phases that you had drawn down from your class.
You mean this old thing?
Yes. Yes, that's it.
This is our 2025 moon cycles calendar. And I'm a perfectionist, so I'm definitely going to redo this one. We did arts and craft in class, but I love having this chart that you can just reference. And I kind of want to look at where my period lines up with different moon cycles and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of the app that we used for so long to track our periods. Stardust.
Yeah.
There's so many witchy things out there, and it really is all connected. So yeah, I'm so curious what you're going to learn here.
It's so connected. So with each moon cycle or phase, it's supposed to be a good time for different types of magic practice. So I thought, hey, why not share it with everyone? I also love celebrating moon magic and moon holidays. It's called Esbats, and it literally means to frolic, which I think is so fun. And
that is really fun.
Everyone knows the imagery of witches under the moonlight frolicking naked. So
right. And like holding hands, their hair braided together.
Exactly. How apropos. So we know that there are 8 phases of the moon, and with each phase, there's different uses in terms of magic. So I really wanted to go over it. And then I'll let you know, because this is coming out in February. February 5th, we have a waxing moon. February 12th, we have a full moon. February 20th, we have a waning moon. And February 27th, we have a new moon. And we'll start with the new moon, which is all about initiation, rebirth, beginnings. So it's really good for cleansing rituals and setting intentions. A waxing crescent moon is great for growth. So going outside and doing nature walks, doing creative planning, and setting up initial plans for the rest of the month. It's a good time to do that on the waxing crescent. The first quarter is good for focus. So good time for motivational reading, staying active, taking steps to achieve the goal that you set during the waxing crescent.
Okay.
The waxing gibbous is all about refinement, which is a great time to assess your progress and your goals and make adjustments. Also, Corinne, apparently during this time, it's good to do Reiki work and energy work.
I know. I was just thinking about that, about how I still need to continue with my Reiki practice and do Reiki level 2.
They have classes at this place with Reiki. And then the full moon is culmination. It's the phase where the moon is the brightest in the sky, showing all her glory. So show your titties and all your glory and bask under the full moon and reap your harvest of your manifested goals. So it's a good time to charge your crystals and your tools and celebrate all the work you've done. The waning gibbous is good for gratitude. So it's a good time to journal and reflect and express gratitude for yourself, for your life, and for everyone around you, and kind of like share that gratitude universally.
I love this. I also feel like sometimes when learning it and hearing about it, it can feel kind of overwhelming because it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many different cycles and like you're supposed to do this or that and focus your energy and do different things. It's not just like a standard kind of like, here's like the one thing you do this one week. But I feel like once you start to practice it, it'll become second nature and it will feel so good to be like, okay, how am I feeling this week? Does it align?
Yeah.
Maybe I should spend 10 minutes journaling this week.
Exactly. And also do what feels right to you. You know, Corinne and I both are very intuition based, and there might be some cycles of the moon that you just don't feel like doing anything. And that's A-okay. So the last 2 is the last quarter, which is all about release. So it's a good time to like release blame or mistakes, or if you have any anger you're holding on to, it's a really good time during this phase of the moon to do that and start your healing. And then the last phase is the waning crescent, and it's all about rest.
I like that.
Healing.
That's good.
Taking a bath,
Just
listening to
sleep.
healing music.
Well, it's interesting that you say making a bath because I was almost thinking that for the week before when you're like trying to let go of things and trying to release. I was thinking about, you know, like a night swim or something like that. A hot tub under the full moon.
I'm all about a hot tub.
Yeah.
Oh, I want a hot tub so bad.
I know you and I keep talking about it. We need a hot tub.
Put a hot tub in the studio.
Yeah, we're going to start podcasting from a hot tub. Oh, that would be so great.
That
under
actually
the full moon.
sounds amazing.
Our editor would not agree, but I think for us, it would feel so good.
It would feel really good for the first like 20 minutes, and then we'd be so pruny and
so hot,
dehydrated by the end of it.
That's when you get out and you take a lap around the cold, snowy ground, and then you plop back in.
Of course. Do a little snow angel in your bathing suit in the snow and then get back in. But yeah, that was today's daily dose of witchcraft and moon magic.
That's incredible. And that's making me realize that I have so many different sort of like green witch, apothecary, tincture making books. And maybe I should go into those books and see what we need to heal ourselves. And then you can tell me what I need to do under the moon to help get better too. We'll just kind of like throw all of the witchiness all at once.
Are you going to put onions on your feet?
No, I was telling you that I really wanted to put onions on the bottom of Noah's feet because he has COVID. He gave it to us. He got it from daycare. Anyhow, no, I didn't do onions, but I'm not far off from slicing up some onions or potatoes and doing that. You got to do what you got to do.
Gut and your intuition when it comes to magic.
But how cool that you and Ash are diving into this witchcraft journey.
Yeah.
Is it just like basic witchcraft 101, or is it like, do you kind of have like a focus? Like, is this more like a moon magic or like a ritual class?
Yeah. So it's Wicca beginnings. And so we're focusing on learning about the Sabbats, the holidays, the Wiccan holidays. So each class will study one of the holidays. And then we're focusing on moon magic and elements like earth, air, wind, fire.
Oh my God, so cool. Well, good that you're feeling so connected to moon magic.
I mean, how can we not be as women? Like, I feel like, or I guess as humans, I mean, we're how much percentage of water, and the moon has direct control over water?
I still can't believe we haven't seen the backside of the moon. Just give us a twirl. Just once. Let us see.
Just spin it around.
Let us see you in all your glory. I want to see your butt. Okay, well, the episode I have today doesn't really have anything to do with witchcraft, but ironically, it is a poltergeist episode, which you and I, when we were planning out episodes, normally we kind of like coordinate our topics, but this time we didn't, and we ended up just like both going dark this month.
I feel like, you know what? Sometimes the universe just has its own plan, and we're just here doing what it wants.
And clearly it wants us to talk about demons. So Sabrina, would you spend a night in the screaming house? Would you spend 13 nights in, I pulled up 2 fingers. Would you spend 13 nights in the screaming house? Because 13 nights is the number of nights that the LaChance family made it in the screaming house. After that, they left screaming. And also, to put this into perspective, the Lutz family, who is the Amityville Horror House family, they lasted 28 days. So 13 days versus 28 days.
Okay. I want to spend one night there, but I would not spend 13 nights. And already this is reminding me of the book September House, which we read for one of our Patreon book clubs. I think it was when you were on maternity leave, but the book is all about like each month a different type of haunting happens in the house.
Yeah. So wild. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of what you had covered the previous 2 weeks as well. There's a lot of similarities. But the LaChance family, you know, like they lasted 13 nights in the screaming house in this quiet, suburban, peaceful Midwestern town. They moved into a home that was built atop this like unassuming farmland, and they thought everything was going to be great. And it was not, because turns out the screaming house really is filled with screams. Like truly.
So does the house itself scream, or do the people in the house scream?
Both.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I wrote the terrified screams of a family pleading for safety and a demon who took immense pleasure in using this home as its hunting ground. Also screaming. So this is the screaming house of Union, Missouri. It's just 50 miles southwest of St. Louis. And the town of Union was founded in the early 1800s. It was primarily used for farming and railroads. It was very ordinary, normal town. But all of that changed. In 1932, this modest brick house was built on top of some old farmland here. And the land, while vacant and seemingly totally appropriate place to start building and subdividing and making more homes for people, this land had a very dark past. For years, the early settlers and Native Americans in the area fought violently over this land. So kind of similar to the Conjuring House origins as well.
Literally where my brain just went. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was fear, resentment, anger just consistently poured out onto this land for those like grasping for power. And it just festered and festered for many years. And soon whispers of a curse arose. And the land and really the house, it saw many owners. And it was said that anyone who lived here in this house would succumb to the curse and experience immense misfortune.
Shit. So is it just this one house, or is it the land around it too? Because like, are there other houses that are haunted?
It's the one house, and I will get to it and tell you kind of like why the whole land should be considered haunted, but why specifically this one house ends up having so much activity.
Gotcha. Okay.
So as the lore goes, one of the families that moved in sometime in the 1940s, they had a young child. And the young child had an accident and ended up drowning in the creek nearby. And consumed with sorrow, the mother just roamed the property screaming in anguish for her child. And she eventually succumbed to her depression and this experience. And she ended up losing her life on the property.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yes. Her spirit remained there, which contributed to kind of this like dark energy, this trauma that just kind of like festered here, and the hauntings that would permeate the grounds for decades. And what we'll learn is really centuries. So this home was a bit part of the rumor mill, obviously. So there were rumors that this place was cursed. It was super haunted, but like rumors are rumors, right? And
Right.
so just a little bit of local folklore, someone who's not a part of the town, or maybe someone who's not even like you and I might never know this about a house in their own town. So some people might have moved in totally not knowing what they were getting into, which is definitely what happened to the LaChance family, and we will get there soon. But before we get into what the LaChance experienced over the horrifying 13 days that they spent in the screaming house, let's talk about the land and why the land itself, aside from the conflict that happened between the native people and the settlers, why this is so dark and so haunted.
Please, let me know. Tell me.
Well, the land was previously owned by Captain John T. Crow. He was the first captain of the 1st Missouri Militia in the Civil War. So, of course, there was also a lot of Civil War deaths nearby. The Civil War was fought, and there's plenty of death, very similar to the Conjuring House again, right here on this land. But really, I think a lot of this is relating back to John T. Crow. So the captain, he and his wife moved in, but then soon and very suddenly after moving in, his wife ended up dying. And there was a rumor that Captain Crow actually killed her.
Shit.
So the reason behind it was that she had an affair with another man who lived on the property. And that is not doing justice to the story, because really the Crows were slave owners and they had enslaved a ton of people that were living there on this land with them. And apparently his wife and someone who was enslaved had an affair, and Captain Crow lost his mind. He killed that man. He killed his wife, and supposedly all of the slaves like went missing. So he probably killed them too.
What?
Yeah. And I have no idea if there's like record of this, but in the articles that I was reading, this is like basically what it was saying, that like they believe that Captain Crow killed everyone in this like fit of rage. But of course it was of the era and of the time where people didn't ask many questions, and like he was a man of power and position and could get away with a ton of things. So who knows if it's true or not, but the hauntings and what we'll learn from the hauntings make me believe that it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, I believe it's true. I mean,
yeah,
look at our history. Also, I've been watching the new Dexter series, Original Sin. I think that's what it's called. And it takes place, I think, in the 90s. And the police used to have a term called NHI for specific cases. And it's an anagram for no humans involved. And it applied to cases where sex workers or like addicts and stuff were the victims. No humans involved. Are you kidding?
Like actual pure evil. I can't believe that. That's the most disgusting fact I've ever heard.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God. I know that it's true, but like, what the fuck?
I know. And it also blows my mind because I'm like, I can't even fathom. Like, you and I are both very empathetic people. I think we take the time to see things from other people's perspectives, but I cannot connect to anyone who views another human life as lesser than their own. Like, no, I just definitely cannot understand it. It's unfathomable.
No, it is. Although I will say, I think there's only one scenario where I would, and that is if someone was actively trying to kill me and I had to basically like separate them from being a person. I couldn't think about like, they have a mom and a dad and probably siblings and coworkers. I wouldn't be able to think about that because I'd have to be able to try to save myself and
That's
maybe
survival. Yeah.
Hurt them. Okay, so obviously Captain Crow is a fucking asshole to me.
Seriously.
Huge dick.
And not in the good way.
No. He had the worst dick ever.
Probably had a small dick, but was a huge dick.
Yes, he was awful. Just a terrible, terrible person. And oh my gosh, I'm forgetting one of the things. So like some of the rumors and stuff about the people that he had enslaved. And I think that like him having slaves is almost a rumor in and of itself, but he has a descendant. Like one of his relatives is like, no, my great grandfather or whatever was a slave owner. Like his own family was like, no. Like he did this.
Interesting.
So that's kind of where some of the rumors and stuff come from. Okay, so obviously he had a ton of land and he originally had a large home on this land. But as time progresses and people move to the area, the land is sold and it starts to become subdivided. And this house, the Screaming House, is the super haunted house because this house was built atop the old slave quarters. So that is why this house has the most amount of activity.
Right. So it's like all this land already has negative energy, but then this specific place on top of that dark energy has even more dark history.
Right. And if what was said is true, if Captain Crow murdered all of these men and maybe his wife in the slave quarters too, like that is that's almost like a mass grave right there that this house is built.
A lot of bloodshed.
There's also a mass grave nearby that was used for those who died during the Civil War and those who were housed at the county poorhouse, and really just like a ton of people that were buried there. I read in one of the articles that was saying that like the local thing to say is like, if you don't know where one of your relatives are buried, then they're probably in this mass grave.
That reminds me of Portsmouth when we did the ghost tour and they talked about that one street where like in the 2000s or I can't remember the specific date, but it was more recent where they realized it was a mass grave.
Yeah, there's a lot of that too. Like even in one of the cemeteries in Boston, there's like almost this little mausoleum and underneath it, it's just like thousands and thousands of bones of various people.
Wow.
Which is horrifying because then it's like, that means there's times that so many people died that they just didn't really know what to do and had to throw them all together.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Also nearby, a street across from the Screaming House is where they did a reenactment of the Lizzie Borden case for theater. And this was in 1974.
For theater?
So they literally like reenacted her murdering her father and stepmom.
Okay. That's interesting that it's in Missouri.
I know. So weird. I don't really know what was going on there. But anyway, weird energy, weird vibes. So many of the neighboring homes have also experienced tragedies, untimely deaths, and suicides. So it does seem like the whole land itself does carry this curse. But the actual poltergeist activity seems to be centralized to the Screaming House.
Okay.
The origins of the Screaming House date back centuries, but this story that we're going to talk about today begins in 2001 when Stephen LaChance was searching for a home for himself and his 3 children. He had a daughter and 2 sons. So the family had kind of endured a tragedy of their own. It was said that his wife had left him and also their children. And so they were kind of going through this grieving period and wanting to start fresh and finding a place that like they could be a family and not have all of these sad memories and like try to move past what had happened to them.
Similar to Jackie Hernandez in the San Pedro poltergeist. She was starting over.
Yep. So they're trying to start over. They had been living in an apartment. It just wasn't working. It was too small for them. And Stephen wanted more space. He wanted something that felt like a home with a yard and like a place of security and feeling like a little bit more permanent for his kids after being kind of completely rocked by what had happened. So he received a call from a local realtor about a large old home in perfect condition with an open porch and a yard. And he was like, oh my God, this sounds perfect. Mm-hmm. So he goes that next weekend, Sunday, to the open house. And when he goes to the open house, he brings his daughter, who's the eldest of the children, with him. And they walk in and the place smells like cookies, like the realtor had put out cookies. And it's such good vibes when they first go in. They're like, oh my gosh, this place is beautiful. It had a really homey feel. And Stephen was also just really appreciating the original woodwork and just like all of this character that it was brimming with inside of this home. There's just so much charm.
Yeah.
Yes, we love charm. Also upstairs, there were enough bedrooms for all of his kids to have their own room. His bedroom would be on the first floor. The basement had a fruit cellar and an old butcher's shower. And just like, there were just really interesting things. And yeah, it was charming.
Right.
And it was also dirt cheap for the size and the condition of the home. So the place was perfect for him. So Stephen submitted his rental application and they were selected a week later. And then they moved within a couple weeks. They moved Memorial Day weekend of 2001. He and his 3 kids, they pull up to their new home, ready for their fresh start. And on that very day, as Stephen is unloading boxes into their home, a sedan pulls up and stops in front of the house. And Stephen looks up and the window in the car rolls down and the person inside calls out and says, "Hope you get along okay here," which is a nice thing to say.
Sure.
But then they slammed on the gas pedal and zoomed away. And so Stephen's daughter, who was outside with him at the time, was like, "Dad, what do you think of that?" And he was like, "I don't know, like maybe it's just a nice neighbor." And the daughter was like, I think that was odd.
Yeah, because if it's a nice neighbor, they would stop and be like, "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood. We're the Smiths. Nice to meet you."
Exactly. Yeah, so his daughter's clocking like there was something odd about this interaction. There's more to that message. So the first night in the home is great. The kids are getting used to sleeping in a new place. Stephen is dreaming up his new life here. But he did notice something the next morning. So when they woke up, as he moved around the house, he noticed that every interior door was fitted with this old-fashioned hook and eye latch. So basically a lock, an old-fashioned lock. But none of the locks were placed on the inside of the doors. They were all on the exterior. So it was like you could walk around through the halls and lock all of the doors, lock something or someone in.
Can someone tell us what the purpose of that is that's rational and not creepy?
I know, right? Very weird. It'd be different if there were locks on both sides, because then I could think like, oh, just for airflow or something, like a really old house, like rattling, trying to keep the door secure so it doesn't like pop open with a drafty old house. But there weren't locks on the inside. It was only the exterior.
Right.
And soon the house would reveal that it was hiding something in all of those empty rooms. From the start, the LeBrant family wondered about the faulty electrical that seemed to be happening around the house. At night, they would frequently see these incredibly bright lights flashing through the windows, which again reminds me so much of the Conjuring house. Even like the warning that they got on move-in day is very a la the Conjuring house.
Yeah.
But there were these really bright lights flashing through the windows. It was almost like a spotlight. And so every time it would beam inside, Stephen would walk outside and be like, what is that? What is going on? And in his investigation, he would be met by nothing but darkness. He couldn't find anything. There were no lights, no telephone wires that seemed to be sparking or weird. No neighbors, no kids, no one like playing a prank. So
he couldn't see anything, but whatever it was could see him.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Stephen that noticed this. His kids were also experiencing it. And they would feel this electrical charge with it too. So it was like this burst of energy right outside their home. And so Stephen was like, we have to figure this out. This could be dangerous. So he goes and he calls a contractor to come check out the electrical work in the home and the exterior and to walk around the property and find if there's anything weird. But you could feel the electricity. He said it was almost like a tickle on the back of their necks, like a buzzing throughout the property. And like, you know, the feeling of your hair standing up on the back of your neck. It was like that, but feeling like something was causing it versus just like the feeling of a presence.
Ooh.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Stephen is like, okay, well, light anomalies are one thing, but how do I explain all the doors in the home suddenly opening and closing on their own? Stephen certainly could not explain it. And his poor kids were so scared living in that house. They would rarely move through the home alone. They preferred like the buddy system. So if they had to go to the living room, it was like they moved as a pack. Like you have to go to the bathroom, everyone's going to the bathroom and escorting you everywhere in the house. Yeah. So they were terrified. So obviously the house is haunted and Stephen is clocking this very quickly. And as a reminder, they only lasted 13 days. So this is happening like day 2. He's like, oh shit, this place I think might be haunted.
Right.
But maybe they just have to get used to this old house, right? Like there's flashing lights, there's doors that open and close and creak, and his kids are scared. But these are all kind of livable hauntings, if you will. But then things ramped up, and it ramped up quickly. The living room had these cherubs in it that Stephen and his daughter found like quite amusing when they were touring it during the open house.
Like the little angels?
Yeah. These like little cherub statues, I think. And so they thought, hey, we have a painting of 2 angels. We should put it in the living room to go with all these cherubs. Like that makes sense. It's kind of cute and silly. A little angel room. So Stephen hangs up the photo, the picture, painting with the angels. He turns around and the picture crashes to the floor. Stephen then turned around, he rehung it up, and then boom, it crashed to the floor again. And Stephen could not get this picture to hang. It just kept falling down. And as he's kind of battling with this picture and trying to figure out like what the fuck is wrong with the walls or the nails or like my picture hanging thing, his daughter calls to him and she and her 2 brothers, they're out on the porch playing. And she's like, Dad, you have to come out here. Dad, come out here. So he goes out and she points to an old man who is walking down the street. And she is like, watch this guy. Watch how he moves. And they notice that when he gets to the point of the sidewalk where he would have to walk in front of their house, he crosses the street to continue his walk. And she said that she had noticed every person do that. And so her dad is like, there is no way. Like, people are not avoiding this house. Like, that's weird. That's bizarre. This can't be. So he sat out there.
This makes me think that like everyone else who went to that open house to potentially rent this house were really just looky-loos who were like, oh my gosh, it's our opportunity to look inside the haunted house in town.
Yeah. Or it also kind of reminds me of Haunting of Hill House, where it's like, did everyone else go and see this house? And it's actually this like horribly decrepit, creepy home.
Ugh.
But the LaChances were given this like beautiful, sunny, warm, fresh cookie smell. And they were seeing something totally different.
Because it was calling them in.
Yes. So Stephen sits out on the porch with his kids and he stays there for 3 hours watching as every single person who is walking by crosses the street when they get to the front of their house. Damn. A few times he said he caught the eyes of people wandering by and tried to like wave a hello and catch their attention. Yet every single person, even if they started to see Stephen, would then ignore him, which is weird and not quite like the Midwest hospitality that we hear about.
No.
So they clocked that. So now it's Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, the weekend that they moved in. So they've been there a few days. And on Sunday, they go to church. And when they come back, they begin to tidy up some of the yard. And Stephen is staring at this one big tree in the yard. And he's very confused because it is spring. And so the trees should be budding flowers or leaves. And yet it almost looks as if it's November for this tree. Like the leaves are dead and falling off. And so he's like, that's really weird. He's like, okay, I'm going to have to bring that up to the landlord, which was this kind of odd old lady that they had interacted with once before.
It's very American Horror Story season 1.
Yes. Yeah, it totally is. So Stephen then asks one of his sons to go grab a garden hose from the basement because he's like, I'm going to just wipe down, like wash the front walkway and probably some of like the front of the house just to get some of the dirt off, make it look a little more flashy and nice. And so his son runs inside and a few moments pass and then screaming, bloody murder.
Our first scream.
The first scream. And it is his son. He is screaming in fear. So Stephen rushes inside and he finds his son in the kitchen. His son is quivering in fear and peed his pants. So something terrified him. He said that something chased him up the basement stairs, that he didn't know what it was, but it was big. And there's also a description of what his son would experience, which was this wild, frazzled-haired being with a long white face with no eyes, razor-sharp teeth. Very creepy, but kind of predictable now that we know that it's a poltergeist, because often the first move of a demon is to target someone. Usually it's a child or someone that feels innocent and feed off of them, isolate, drain, destroy.
Right.
And it seemed like perhaps this boy could have been his target. So Stephen probably should not have asked his young child to go into the scary basement where monsters are, right? That's what Stephen's thinking. He's like, I bring my kids to this big old house in a town that they never lived in before. Like, I understand that he has some real fear, but, you know, it's probably like child imagination, right? Like typical kid stuff.
Right.
But then he's also like, but he peed his pants. And that's a pretty intense reaction to just being startled and running up the stairs.
Clearly, he's terrified.
And things keep happening. Furniture started moving around. Rooms would be entirely rearranged. And it wouldn't just be one specific room. It was like any room in the house, the kids' rooms, his room. Nowhere was safe. Nothing was off limits.
Completely rearranged, like furniture completely moved.
Yep. Interior design. It's The Sims. This thing is just constantly moving things around.
Wow.
So now it's Monday. They have now been in the house for a full 3 days. And once more, they return to the home from running out and they find every light in the house turned on. And Stephen had experienced this before the previous few days when he would like run out to grab something. He'd come back and the lights would all be on and he would tell his kids like, hey guys, you have to turn the lights off. We can't just have all the lights in the house on. And they were like, we didn't do it. But this time on Monday, Stephen had all of his kids with him. So when they return to the house and all of the lights are on, he starts to realize, oh shit, my kids were not doing that. Something or someone is in the house. So he goes in thinking that there's an intruder, looks around and cannot find any evidence of someone breaking in, any evidence of anyone being there. But the house is freezing. The thermostat is set to 30 degrees warmer than what it is in this house. It's 30 degrees colder.
Jeez.
And Stephen's neck, as he's walking around, suddenly has that feeling of the electrical current running all over his body. He was buzzing and he was scared. And so was his family. So that night and for every night following, the entire family would sleep in Stephen's room together on the first floor.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I would do that too.
A few days pass and the family is in the living room. The kids are all turned with their backs to the doorway, but Stephen is facing it and he watches in silent horror as something moved through the kitchen doorway. It was a dark shadow, looked to be the figure of a man, and he was moving against this sort of like blackish smoke. So his figure was kind of coming and going, being formed and not formed by the mist that kind of floated about him. And this thing started to move closer, and the mist started turning into a defined face with hollow eyes. And it was now walking into the living room where Stephen and his kids were. It approached the family and stopped just before the kids would see it, and then poof, vanished.
Oh.
And this is when Stephen realized this is not just a haunted house. I need to make a plan. We need to move. So this was not the place for his family to recover and thrive. And he was not going to be like, oh, we got to stick it out. It's a rental. F that. But before that, he needs to figure out a way to get his family out of the house.
Sure.
So he says in this very moment, after seeing this man approach him and his family, he says, hey, kids, let's go get a soda and see grandma. Come on, guys. It'll be fun. Like, he's just like, oh my God, we have to get out of the house this very second. So he's basically shouting this at his kids and moves to the door quickly. He's like, come on, guys, let's go. The kids are confused, but probably also scared seeing their dad like this. So they are getting up and they are rushing down the steps of the porch. Stephen turns to lock the door. And as he's turning with his hand on the front door, the house screams. A loud, agonizing scream, like a man in pain, and it just echoed throughout the whole neighborhood. All the dogs start barking. It is wailing, the entire house is.
Well, doesn't this make you feel so sad, given the history of this land, that like there's just so much unrest here?
Yeah.
It needs help.
It does, but I don't know. I think it's the poltergeist kind of doing. I almost hope it's the poltergeist doing this, and that it's not some of the people whose lives were who just experienced like immense torture and pain throughout their lives, just giving a part of their soul to this place.
Right.
So the house is screaming and Stephen screams. He screams, get in the car! And they all collectively run. And as the car is pulling out, one of Stephen's sons says, Daddy, the basement monster is standing in the upstairs window. And so Stephen looks back at the house as they're pulling out, and the black misty figure that he had seen approach the living room is now in the window glaring down at the car.
It's so haunting of Hill House. Oh my gosh.
I have chills. Horrible timing. Stephen had a business trip that he had to leave for a week. He keeps the kids at his parents' house. They don't return after like the ice cream at grandma's. They go and they stay at grandma's house for that entire week. Yep. Stephen very quickly rushed that following day in the early morning to the house to like grab what he needed super fast for his business trip, and then took the trip. And during the trip, Stephen is racking his brain about what to do with the hauntings. Like, what is he going to do? Because this is only a few days in, and it is horrible.
It's this bad right off the bat. Like, what's it going to turn into? Yeah,
exactly. The business trip ends. He goes to his parents' house. He picks up the kids, and they go back to the house. So far, so good. Nothing happened right away. Stephen's mom suggests to him that he should call the landlord and ask her some questions about the house. Like, basically say, were there any experiences that the previous tenants brought up with the energy of the home, or like anything unfavorable happened in the past? Like, basically, she wants him to call and understand, like, why is this house haunted? So he calls, and this lady is a little bit odd to begin with. She's super dodgy about the questions that Stephen's asking. So then he point blank asks, have any previous tenants mentioned a ghost? And she actually answers this one. She says, yes, one of them did.
Only one?
Just one, apparently. She said the tenant was a woman who said that her dead father had come to visit her there. So it wasn't the type of haunting Stephen was experiencing. And also that woman was kind of saying like she didn't believe the tenant, essentially.
Interesting. It almost feels like this house is a mirror for what you're experiencing in your life. And it's
interesting.
Creating a spirit that reflects it.
You should write that. Write that movie. That's a good one. It's not what's happening here, although it's so cool.
Are we going to get answers?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, because my biggest question right now at this point is, how did no one prior to Stephen's family living here experience what they're experiencing?
Well, so that brings me to the point that the landlord made, where she did say there was another tenant who did not say anything about ghosts, but left in the middle of the night and abandoned all of his belongings and never came back for them.
I mean, you don't have to say ghosts to know that that's ghosts.
Right. And she also told Stephen that she had a really hard time keeping any tenant for more than a year.
So a lot of people didn't talk about it.
I guess not. So not quite the answer Stephen was hoping for, but it did provide context and suggested that, yeah, people were probably all experiencing hauntings here before the LeBrant family moved in a week ago. So Stephen is now trying to make moves, and he's got to make moves quickly, right? They're a week in and things are horrible. He's got to go. There's been very little ramp up period for the hauntings. It just seems like everything was thrown at them immediately. And so he needs help, not only getting out of the house, but also just trying to figure out like what the fuck is going on in the house.
Right.
So he frantically sends a bunch of emails to a ton of paranormal groups, including Ed and Lorraine Warren. But apparently he didn't hear back. And I don't know if that was he didn't hear back from the Warrens or he didn't hear back from anyone.
That almost makes me think that however he reached out, the spirits intercepted it.
Very The Conjuring house. Right. And also the Smurl possession. Remember when she has the whole conversation with the priest and it was the demon on the other end of the phone?
Hey.
Oh my God. That's another episode that we have a Smurl possession 2-parter that came out. We can link it.
Yeah.
So now it's Monday night. They have been in the house for a week and a half and Stephen is on the phone with his mom and the kids are playing in the background. The doors then begin to rattle and Stephen interrupts his call with his mom to yell at his kids. They're all in his room. And so he's like, guys, stop, like, be quiet. The rattling continues. So then he calls out again. And this time he gets a response and it's his daughter's voice and she's very scared. She calls out and says, Dad, my brothers are asleep. She's been reading. No one's touching the doors. The temperature then drops 30 degrees. Ice cold. The electrical charge is pulsing through Stephen. And this time the sensation is accompanied by a very foul stench.
Yikes.
It's stuck in the air. It's burning Stephen's nostrils. And then he hears a voice. It's distant at first, but it's screaming. And the screaming is building and building and building until it becomes this loud, full-on shriek. It's coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It's filling every space in the house. The house is screaming.
Jeez.
The house then begins to shake, and then there's a loud noise from upstairs. It sounds like huge, heavy feet, boom, 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 descending the stairs. And a man's voice is screaming over and over again. And Stephen's daughter is now screaming. She's screaming in fear for her dad. So Stephen is moving through the house. He is making his way to his bedroom to collect his kids. He gets there, and he can feel something right on his back the whole time. It's like something is chasing him, breathing down him, watching him as he tries to find his kids. The screaming continues. And now he hears 2 voices. There's a man and a child, both shrieking over and over again, horrendously loud.
Oh, no.
The air still freezing cold. A 3rd voice now added to the mix. It's Stephen. He's now screaming. He is so scared.
Of course.
And so Stephen gets to his bedroom, to where his kids are, but the door is shut and he cannot open it. Something has locked the door.
Okay, so it does lock from the inside, but only if there's ghosts.
Apparently. So it's not budging an inch and he's trying the doorknob. He's pushing, pushing, pushing. Finally, he just starts slamming all of his body weight. Boom, 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 over and over again. And the door is not moving. Like literally no movement, just more screaming. Everyone's screaming. The house is screaming. Entities are screaming. His kids are screaming. So he just keeps slamming himself. And then he yells out, God help me. And then the door flings open. So he calls
just
to
by
God.
Calling upon God like that.
Apparently.
I feel very sad that they experienced all of this, but like I really wish that this was like recorded or experienced by others, because how do you write this off rationally? You can't.
Well, and it also makes me curious because he does have a book, which I'll show at the end and tell everyone what it's called. He wrote a book about his experience with the 13 days living in the screaming house, but it does make me curious if there have been, since publishing the book, other people who've reached out to him who've spent time in that house. We're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was losing my mind.
Damn.
So the door is now open. He has access to his room and the kids. And he yells to his middle son to grab his youngest and then head for the car. The footsteps are still descending the stairs. They hear the boom, 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 and the screams are still slicing through the frigid air. His daughter is frozen in panic and fear. Yeah, Stephen said that he literally had to slap her to get her to move. And I'm like, couldn't you have just picked her up and carried her?
Yeah, there's other options here, Stephen.
Yeah, but I think he was also panicked. So
slap your daughter.
The whole family then runs outside. The entire house is shaking and screaming as they race for the door. They could feel this evil presence chasing them, just one step away from catching them. And Stephen and his kids get to the car. They quickly drive down the street, but they don't continue. They park and they turn the car back around and they watch the house. And as they watch the house, to their horror, they can see this misty black figure of the man that they had seen before moving room to room, looking in every corner, frantically searching every section of every room as if it was looking for them.
Interesting. This is really reminding me of September House.
I need to read that book.
I highly recommend it if you haven't read it to everyone. It's really fascinating, and there is like one main dark energy that is trying to trap people there.
Okay, so Stephen makes the decision while they're in the car watching this man pace around the house looking for them, this entity. He makes the decision right then and there to never return. That image, the demon trying to hunt them down in the house, it just felt so incredibly unsafe.
Yeah.
And it was something that he would never want his children to experience. And that was actually the last thing that his children would ever see of the home, is this thing looking for them. Stephen did return to collect their belongings, but he never went alone. His brother went with him and took photos of the house as they were packing up. And down in the fruit cellar, one of the pictures showed something. It was the face of a man. And they were thinking that this was the face of the entity that was terrorizing them. I could not find the photo. I wish I had it.
I wonder if it's in the book.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I'll rent it from the library really quick and see if I can see it. So during this final trip to the house, Stephen said, quote, "I remember what the old lady said as I turned over the key. Standing there, the whole side of my arm and torso still bruised from having thrown myself against that bedroom door. She said, 'Some people are meant to live in an old house like that, and some people aren't. I never thought you were the old house type,'" which is rude.
It is rude, and also like that doesn't dictate a haunting or not.
Well, and most people were not set up to endure this house.
No.
After moving out, a friend sent Stephen a link to a picture of a man. And it was the same man that Stephen's brother had captured in a photo in the fruit cellar. The man in the picture was John T. Crow, the slave owner, the suspected murderer.
I hate that he is still running amok. He did enough in his life. Go away.
I know. About a year after they moved out, another friend reached out to Stephen and said that he had witnessed a police car race up to the home and a family all rushing out in their pajamas in the middle of the night. So maybe a medical emergency, or maybe they thought it was an intruder, not of this realm, perhaps. So people were still experiencing things. And the home has become kind of a hotspot for paranormal investigators. And it really always has been, because apparently in the 1950s and 1956, the Catholic Church was brought in to investigate the home. And it resulted in a 156-page report declaring this house indeed haunted. But I have no clue if an exorcism was performed or what they did, but it is documented by the Catholic Church that this property is evil, essentially.
Are people still living in it? Like, is it rentable?
I couldn't see anything. I was like trying to go on Google Earth and see. Rumor has it it's a dog kennel now.
Oh, those poor doggies.
I know.
I hate that.
Yeah, they said nothing's happened since it's been transitioned to a dog kennel, but it's like, okay, well, maybe not to you, but probably it's to the dogs.
Or maybe the dogs are just bringing too much love and joy and innocence.
I hope so.
That
I hope they chase that man away.
Can't do anything.
Yeah.
I hope.
So the investigators and ghost hunters who've gone there have captured many EVPs during their time in the home. There was one report that said they captured a voice saying over and over, "Please help." A man's voice saying, "I like little boy."
Ew.
And investigators have also captured photo evidence. They said that they feel really nauseous and dizzy when they're in there. They feel oppressed. Some have been bitten, scratched, chased out of the home. But despite everything that's happened at the Screaming House and despite escaping the Screaming House of Union, Missouri, Stephen LaChance said that he still feels haunted by the home. Stephen said, quote, "I still don't sleep very well. In my dreams, I see a faceless man standing at that basement, washing away blood from his naked, blood-covered body, grunting, panting, breathing. Yes, I do believe in ghosts. And maybe you should too."
Holy shit.
Most of the information from this episode came from an article written by Stephen LaChance himself from Legends of America. But he also has a book, The Uninvited, The True Story of the Union Screaming House, if you want some more juicy demonic details. But that is the Screaming House of Union, Missouri.
Well, that's horrifying. And yeah, I didn't know that a house could scream, but clearly it can.
Apparently it can. And apparently bad people who do bad things may never leave. Which part of me is like, if they did what is said that they did, I hope that they're trapped there forever. but I also want the house to be inaccessible, that they have to just like live there forever alone in their misery.
Well, my thing is like, is it even that spirit of that person anymore? Or is it just manifested into become something so much worse in like tar and molasses darkness?
I don't know, but I feel like this is the shortest haunting stay we've ever heard of, 13 days. And I'm so glad that they had the opportunity to leave. And I'm glad that it was a rental because most of the time it is people who purchased a home and you can't just easily leave.
Yeah. You have like a mortgage and you put all your money into it. Yeah. Well, I was between doing a listener story from Missouri or a haunted house, and I found a Missouri haunted house.
Ooh, okay, perfect.
Okay. This is from our listener, Brittany, and it's called Spirits in Missouri. Hey girls, I've been thinking about writing this for a while, but I always forget because I listen while I'm at work. I absolutely love the podcast, and I tell all my coworkers who are all men and who totally insert sexual jokes after I say the name, but I tell them all to listen.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We did it to ourselves.
We knew what we were doing. All of my experiences come from the same house. Several of them are mine and others are from various family members. So several years ago, my family and I lived in a house in a super small town in Missouri. Whenever I went to visit, my dad would say that he experienced spirits, but he never really would elaborate. Well, after dealing with a bad landlord, I moved back in with my family. So this house was built around the turn of the 19th century. It had a maid staircase, a formal dining room, a butler's pantry, a swinging door with a window that a maid would watch your dinner if you needed anything, grand staircase, pocket doors, and all original hardwood floors.
Beautiful.
So after I moved back in, my dad tells me that the room I'm staying in is the one that he's heard children playing and laughing in.
Oh, great. Thanks.
He also saw my nephew's toys move around the room. I didn't think anything of it, so I went about my day. A month or so later, my parents go out of town and they come home and they hear a buzzing noise in their room. And they find that my mom's vibrator had been turned on.
Oh, wow. Something's curious.
Yes. My sister had been getting ready for school one morning when I was not there, and she went to go down the back staircase where we had a large island in the kitchen. And there at the island, she saw a woman all in black sitting on the island weeping.
Oh.
She called my mom in hysterics, crying about this woman. And apparently my sister had seen this woman a lot. So now my stories. I went to a work Christmas party and during I've never heard of it this way. Brittany says, rob your neighbor gift exchange, which is like white elephant.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've never heard it called that either.
Yeah. I got one of those feet massagers that vibrates. I came home from work to hear that vibrating foot massager turned on, and it was in my closet. It had been turned on while I was gone. I was quite shocked. So the ghosts like vibrating objects.
Apparently.
Another time I was playing with my nephew in the living room, and he was maybe a year and a half at that time, and my mom was in the kitchen mopping. She called me into the kitchen, frantic. I walk inside, and I see in the freshly mopped floors are bare footsteps smaller than mine and larger than my nephew's.
That's creepy.
And
So
we could
creepy.
tell that the footprint was clearly missing a pinky toe.
Could it be the wailing woman?
It could be.
Jeez. Ooh.
My last experience was when I was home alone one night and us living in a small town, I was just watching something on PBS. I heard footsteps going up or down the grand staircase, and not just bare feet, but heavy steps, like boots, belonging to a man. I called out my brother-in-law's name thinking maybe he stopped by for something, but it was quiet. No answer. Then it hit me. I got goosebumps and I called my mom in a panic. I went upstairs to the safety of my bed and laid under my blankets until my parents got home late that night. That's just some of the stories, but next door, please make a stop in Kansas City. I would love to see you guys. See you on the other side, Brittany.
I'm curious who this spirit is, or like many spirits. I don't know, because there's that poor wailing woman who's so upset and
I know.
potentially walking around if those are her footprints. But yeah, I don't know. It almost feels like there's multiple here.
Yeah, it feels like perhaps these are previous tenants of the house. A man, a woman. I'm sad that they're sad, or the woman's sad.
I know. And at least they have some entertainment through vibrating objects, you know?
That's
at
true.
least there's that.
Hopefully she's massaging her feet, even if she's
Right.
missing her pinky toe. You don't need it.
I'm curious if, so this was the house that she lived in growing up, but I'm curious if her parents still live there.
Yeah, I'm curious because it was like a brief period of time that she moved back in with her family.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm curious. Brittany,
Ooh.
we have questions.
Yeah, and also some suggestions for gifts for the spirits, because I feel like if they're enjoying some of the vibrating objects, maybe you need to get them some toys and things to entertain them.
Right. If you know anything more about the Screaming House in Missouri, or if you have ghost stories from Missouri or from anywhere in the world, please email them to us at twogirlsoneghostpodcast@gmail.com.
You can rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can also tell other people about the podcast. That's so helpful. Join the pyramid scheme, join our cult, listen every week.
Yes.
And you can follow us on social media. We have Instagram, TikTok, all that jazz. And watch on YouTube if you would like to watch the podcast. We do have video format over on YouTube.
And let us know if you're getting into moon magic with us, because that's what we're doing over here.
You can also check us out on Patreon. We have a lot of offerings, including additional bonus episodes that are full length every single month, book clubs, campfire stories where we tell all ghost stories with you personally live on a virtual stage. So go check that out.
And thank you to our editor and producer, Jamie Ryan, for dealing with us as sick ghouls over here.
Mm-hmm.
We love you all.
Thank you. And we will see you on the other side.
Very spooky.